Good morning, good day, good evening, and welcome to today's Stats Café on the use of satellite data by statistical institutions. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's cafe. The question for today is, how do we increase the uptake of this very useful type of data, satellite data, by statistical institutions? I have with me today a very large number of experts, resource people, discussants to help us all get through this question. Now, during the past year, ESCAP has developed some tools that can help statistical institutions use satellite data for land cover change, maps and statistics, for mapping of urban hotspots, and more tools are to come. And the reason we set out to do these, to develop these tools is to help anyone who wants to start investigating this type of data with some very practical step-by-step tools, so that this initial barrier of having to work on a new type of data, new type of software and other tools could be easily overcome. And today is really your chance to influence further work by ESCAP and other organizations in this area, to contribute your ideas, your questions, your recommendations. And what we will do is first to have a brief introduction of the tools that have been developed, and then we will have a number of discussants or panelists who've looked into these tools and have feedback to share on further development of other tools, what might be helpful, what could be their recommendations going forward. We will then open up for broad questions and answers. And for all of you who are listening in, you're very welcome to plug your questions into the meeting chat as we go along, and we will then pick them up during our Q&A session. I'll ask all of you to please keep yourself on mute as long as you're not speaking, so that we can avoid an echo and have a manageable audio during the session. For now, it is my pleasure to introduce the first speaker of the day, and that is Ms. Ayo Marshall, who works at ESCAP in the Statistics Division and has been coordinating the development of the tools that have come online already. So Ayo, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks, Rike. I hope you can all hear me, and I hope you can see my screen. And good day to everyone once again, and thanks for joining. As Rike said, we've been developing a number of these tools over the past couple months. And in a previous Stats Cafe, we discussed how open source geospatial data can be used to produce your own land cover change maps and tables and conduct land cover change analysis. And we were in the process of finalizing the guide, and we can finally say that we have produced one, a number of them actually. So this is the first one. This guide shows you step by step from downloading the data, the open source data, downloading the open source programs, R and QGIS, pre-processing, and the methodology to develop your own land cover change maps and statistical tables, such as these maps that we see here. In the example that we used for the guide, we used the Ganga-Brahmaputra River Basin, and it shows the land cover changes between 1995 and 2015 for that river basin. In the caption, you can see the expansion of the artificial surfaces between 1995 and 2015. Similarly, the guide shows you how to develop these land cover change matrices that you can see the quantities changing in the land covers in that river basin, but you can use it for your own purposes as well. The next guide that we published was similar to the first one, but this one uses advanced code in R along with the QGIS because it allows you to make the land cover analysis, the land cover change analysis between, say, 1995 and 1996, 1995 and 1997, and so on for a certain time period. So this uses advanced code to generate those maps and those temporal land cover change matrices. The next guide that we produced is one which shows urban hotspot maps. And for the purpose of this guide, we define urban hotspots as the expansion of artificial surfaces or built up areas. So again, this guide shows you step by step how to produce the maps. As you can see on the slide here, it shows how to download QGIS and the open source data, and it also shows you how to define the expansion of either artificial surfaces according to the SIA land cover categories or the ESA built up areas. And then we show you the hotspot methodology, the best practice hotspot methodology. So on to the other work that ESCAP is doing in the field of integrating geospatial data and statistical data. We are in the process of finalizing future guides which show the population's exposure to risk. This integrates population data with statistical data as well as with flood risk data and population data and satellite data, yes. And the previous guides that we show are in English, and we're having those guides translated to Russian. Additionally, me and my colleagues have collaborated with the Fiji Bureau of Statistics to assist them with producing their own land cover accounting, and my colleague Latia will expand on that later in this session. Additionally, we've collaborated with APDIM on their risk assessment of sand and dust storms, and our colleague Amin will expand on that and discuss how the tools can be used by their institution in disaster information management. And as Rike said, there are endless possibilities as to the integration of statistical data and geospatial and satellite data. And we want to hear from you, but we will also hear from other colleagues on those possibilities that are being developed and being discussed in ESCAP. And which brings me to some other possibilities as well. There are 39 global SDG indicators that have been identified as benefiting from geospatial information. And this has come from a study that ESCAP colleagues have done. And they found that examples of 18 SDG indicators that are being calculated by countries using geospatial information. And more information on those can be found via this link on the slide. So please follow the links on the slide to get more information on the work that has been done, the guides that have been published, and how you can get started on your own work to integrate statistical data and satellite and geospatial data. Thanks for listening. For any information, feel free to contact us at ESCAP Statistics.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ayo, for this very brief and very clear introduction to the work and the tools that have been developed and are available now for anyone to use. We will make sure that all the presentations that are being shown in this session will be available on the Stats Café website after the session so that you can all have access to the links. So with this brief introduction, we will now hear from a number of people who have either used or been involved in developing these tools to hear their reflections. As Ayo mentioned, we have been working very closely with the Fiji Bureau of Statistics and with one of ESCAP's institutions, the Asia Pacific Disaster Information Management Center, and we will hear from from representatives of these institutions. But very first, it is my pleasure to give the floor to two resource people and close collaborators from the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. And we have with us today Sangeeta Dubey, who is the senior statistician in FAO's Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, and Anthony Burgard, who is a statistics consultant with the same office. So Sangeeta and Anthony, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. I actually have my colleagues with me. We're in the office today. I'll take off my mask when I'm speaking and then put it on later. So I wanted to cover a few areas overall in terms of satellite data, particularly for crop statistics. And I think the question was asked in terms of what's the role of satellite data in agriculture censuses and surveys. Now, I do want to mention, most of the audience I think already knows this, that satellite data is only one type of remote sensing data. And remote sensing often also goes by the term Earth observation data in the UN system. Aerial photos from planes, aerial photos from drones are other types of remote sensing data. We won't talk about that today. What is satellite data used for in crop statistics? It's two broad areas of statistics. One is crop identification. Actually three. One is crop identification, the second is crop area estimation, and the third is crop yield or production estimates. And it's used either directly or indirectly, particularly for the area estimation. So indirectly, the use of GPS handheld devices, which I think more and more countries are using for various types of surveys, including social surveys, are used to identify, in the case of crop statistics, plot boundaries or parcel boundaries to get at area estimates. That's an indirect use. And then, of course, the direct use is actually using the images once they're processed to identify the crops, the areas in which the crops are grown, and then from that to estimate the production. However, it's not yet at the point where the use of satellite data is advanced enough that we can use it for all crop statistics. Obviously, crops grown underground, like tubers, aren't going to be harder to measure. So the research has been further advanced in monocrops such as wheat and rice, where fields are visible from overhead. There are countries that are using it to identify illicit crops like poppies, poppy fields that are used to develop heroin. The identification of crops, of course, depends on the resolution of the satellite images. The open sources have lower resolution, so they can be very challenging, whereas the higher resolution images are very, very costly. And then superimposed on that are the costs of processing power, because for crop identification, there are still artificial intelligence-based algorithms that are developed to identify crops that are specific to a country's agroecological zone, time of year, and other knowledge. And of course, sampling still comes in terms of validating the estimates that are coming from crops. So in an ideal world, what we would see in an agriculture census is, rather than estimating a crop area simply from farmers' recall, we could sample using satellite data, estimating that area instead, and subsample during the census and validate that area through GPS handheld. So right now we're still in a world where it's multi-mode. What I really appreciate about these guidelines that ESCAP has put out is we're not going to develop our own capacities to use satellite data unless we're able to experiment. And because a lot of the tools are now open and there are data sets that are open, the opportunity to build capacity within a National Statistics Office through this kind of experimentation, to build our knowledge, to work together across the GIS experts and the statisticians, I think is very much an area that we're seeing demand from countries in the region, a great deal of interest, but also a growing awareness that it's not a trivial exercise, and it's not going to, satellite data is not going to replace in-person data collection for now, but it can certainly reduce the burden if done smartly. So with that, I'd like to turn to my colleague Anthony just to give a few more details that may be useful.
Sorry. Greetings, everyone. My name is Anthony Burgard from the FAO Regional Office here in Bangkok, Thailand. So I'd just like to continue with the conversation that Sangeeta just started here and talk a little bit about some of the work that we have been doing, particularly with the agricultural census, and talk about some of the work that I have been doing is about integrating low-cost technologies in the use of censuses and surveys. And one of the ways we've been doing that is helping countries integrate the use of geospatial information as a whole, as a broad picture across satellite imagery, remote sensing imagery, and also the use of GPS devices to collect location-based data points. So in terms of the agricultural census, one of the main things that we have been doing so far is, particularly I have been working on, is the use of CAPI. And what the CAPI allows us to do is it facilitates, it eases the collection of geospatial data points, particularly the location-based GPS points. So in this process of the census and data collection, we've been trying to promote or advocate the greater use or collection of these types of data that could be analyzed and used in new ways. Right? But geospatial data can be used in many ways throughout the census and survey life cycle. So I just wanted to give some examples of how these are used. The most typical way geospatial data is typically used is kind of like an auxiliary data source. So it's a way to help countries and offices to verify the estimates that they have produced through the census itself, right? By producing derived products based on satellite imagery, such as like land cover, which can offer the possibility of estimates of land area, crop area estimates. There's also a few different other areas I want to mention very briefly. It can be used, satellite imagery, for instance, can be used to help in the checking of the frame. Right? So if we know there are certain areas that can be classified as agriculture, then it can help to ensure that we know, to ensure that we have full coverage of the frame. The second is also as I mentioned, kind of the integration of satellite imagery into the data collection instrument itself, into the, for example, into the tablet computer, for instance. So you see some countries who have started to upload or to integrate the imagery itself into the tablet device to do some things like parcel area boundary delineations, where they can draw the parcel boundary on the tablet itself to get a better estimate of that land area. And you can also see some advanced countries where they also use satellite imagery to help inform the numerator for navigation, so they can understand the context of the geography that they're working in. Now, the second topic that I kind of wanted to sort of talk about was about the methodology for determining types of crops. So the one thing that we found is there's no magic button as to, if I press this button, I'll automatically get estimates for this particular crop. Right? It requires a lot of research and coordination with the research groups to develop the algorithms, to develop the processes to be able to estimate these different types of crops. And at the moment, I think a large part of that research is really focused on monocropped type crops, because they're essentially, when we're working with remote sensing data, we're trying to interpret from an image what is the probability or the likelihood that that particular piece of color or spectrum of light represents something. So we have to kind of, when we're working with agriculture, we have to understand kind of the phenology of the crop as well. So we have to understand what colors does the crop represent. How do those colors change over time?
Anthony, can you wrap up in half a minute, 30 seconds?
Oh, sure. So the main point that I want to bring up from this is that sometimes we need to coordinate outside of our field We need to work with the geospatial experts. We need to work with the subject matter experts in agriculture to identify how these crops evolve over time. And by extending these collaborations, we're going to better be able to produce better and better estimates as agricultural statisticians. And one example of this is really, I like to mention the case of the Australian Bureau of Statistics, who works with Australia Geoscience, who share their official data statistics with the subject matter experts in order to better produce these algorithms for better improved estimates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, both Sangeeta and Anthony, both of you for speaking to two topics which is clearly of interest to our participants today. We have received questions that relate specifically to the use of satellite data for agricultural census and to crop type determination. So thank you very much for speaking on that. And thank you also both of you for making some more general points, which I find is of relevance to more broadly. And that is the issue of satellite data not being a magic bullet. We have to use it as one of the many types of data that's available to us. It requires collaboration between statisticians and GIS experts to make the best use of it. We may need more data with more resolution that exceeds current, ability to pay, but nevertheless, more and more freely available data sets and freely available types of software is actually available to all of us already now. So there is no excuse to not start to experiment and build our own capacity, even if we may not get that specific resolution that's needed for a specific task. We can all get into this game actually cost-free at the moment. And we've all witnessed during the past couple of years that the type of data and the type of software that's actually available freely becomes better and better very, very fast. To people in the audience who have very specific tasks or questions related to agricultural statistics, you see here we have two experts in the cafe today, and if any one of you wants to reach out maybe after the session, you're very welcome to contact me, and I can facilitate that contact. And my colleague will post my email address here in the chat box, so you can all get hold of me. And I get a hands up there from FAO. Thank you for that. And it's now my pleasure to turn to our next panelist of today. We have a representative from the Fiji Bureau of Statistics, Ms. Litia Kurisakila Mate. And Litia has been with us on the whole journey, developing and testing these tools. And in the process, Litia has been instrumental in also getting the first experimental land accounts produced for Fiji. So we have a person who is both an expert on the use of this type of data and the theories behind it, but has actually done it in practice. Litia, it's my pleasure to give the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Rike. I probably wouldn't say expert, but just someone who's gone through the process of trying to come out with an experimental land cover account. So good morning, afternoon, or evening to you all. And I would just like to take this time to share briefly with you compiling Fiji's experimental land cover account. So next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So how we came about to produce these land cover accounts was really through our national document, which is the Green Growth Framework. And we had begun working with CI in 2016, and most of the accounts that we had produced with regards to CI was from our reference to our national document, which was the Green Growth Framework. And this shows our socio-economic as well as environmental issues that we have in the country, as well as like short and long-term plans on how to address these issues. And so initially the idea was to prepare a land use account, because we had wanted to monitor how the tourism sector, which is Fiji's largest foreign exchange earner, was growing, and which parts of the country as well it was impacting. So however, taking a step back to look at the data again with land cover at and set a base with attempting land use. So in tackling the land cover, we would also be able to provide some data to help inform users on issues about sustainable land and ocean resources, which is one of the main environmental pillars in our Green Growth Framework. And very briefly, they look at the growing demand for land by different segments, impacts of sea level rise on agriculture, and impact of climate change on land use activities. So keeping this in mind, we ventured out to begin stakeholder meetings with those who we knew would be able to help us to get the data that we needed to prepare these accounts. Next slide. However, we were met with a data availability challenge. And because the data that we needed, which was time series data, what we wanted was not available, or was not at our disposal, and other ministries as well could not provide us with this data, we decided to take a pragmatic approach, assisted by our consultants, Mr. Sohil Rastan and Alad Musunuru, who suggested that we use globally sourced data, which is available to the public via the European Space Agency website as part of the climate change monitoring program, I believe. So we used ESA maps, which was medium resolution, 300 by 300, for the period of 2005. Sorry, that should be 2005 to 2015. And for the analysis, so we used QGIS software because it was free and readily available to everyone. So it was cost saving for us as well as effective. And for the analysis bit, the consultant suggested that we use the SEN method of regression, which I understand is more simple to compute, robust, with limited assumption regarding measurement errors. And we use the SEN template from the Finnish Meteorological Institute, which I found quite user-friendly as a first-time compiler of this land account. So yes, in terms of the validation process, we had to do a lot of stakeholder meetings and actually sit down with our data custodians, which were the Ministry of Forestry, Lands and Mineral Resources, as well as Ministry of Agriculture, just to help us determine the trends and whether our results were actually going with the trend, or whether we were, doing something wrong in terms of the processing of the data that we had got. And so after that, we would have reviewed as well with the consultants, and then we had an internal review as well before publication, and then we decided on the frequency of the publication. Next slide, please. So, like from the template of the, you can see the ones that I write on the results that we had gotten from the running these regressions, and with that it gives us an idea of just how this particular land classification, broadleaf tree cover, is changing over the period that we did, 2005 to 2015. And also with that, we validated these results with our Ministry of Forestry, and they also agreed onto the trend, and so this gave us a bit more confidence in publishing these results. Same with the built-up area. So just these interesting comparisons that we could make after we had run these regressions using QGIS and the SEN. So next slide. One slide missing, which is the process. It actually highlights 10 of the steps that I had taken with regards to compiling this account. So maybe I'll quickly go through them. So basically the first thing I did was downloading the software, which is QGIS, and then step 2 would be the downloading and extracting of raster and vector files from the relevant databases, which was all on to do with the guidance of who had a hand in producing these guides that Ayo was referring to. And step 3 involved reading in the data. Step 4, clipping the data to administerial boundaries, maps that we had, and then step 5, producing the R report for each year. Then downloading the ESA land cover datasets 2016 to 2018, which were different format from previous years, and which we decided not to actually include in the in our last publication because of that particular reason. They went, and so we thought it consistent in our trying to compare the land cover change for different years. Step 7, extracting the data and then to the raster layer, generating our reports here for each year, and then moving the that was saved previously in CSV format to Excel. So as you can see, the guide provides these really detailed steps that you can take. And like I said, I don't really, I'm not really an expert in land cover accounting, but this has really opened my eyes to the power of the software QGIS and what you can do using satellite images. And then step 9, running the analysis by the agreed upon categories, which was something that we had to do. We concorded our CLN cover classes with the SO1, and also we had to do it according to how we as to what classifications and what was appropriate for us. So we didn't take all of the land cover classes, mostly because of the resolution. We couldn't confirm that it was actually that particular, to that detail that was how that particular land cover was changing. So we had to aggregate a few of the land cover classes, what I'm trying to say. But apart from that, we were able to do so many things with the data that we had already run, and the analysis that we were able to the results that we were able to get was actually very quite useful to us. With regards to step 10, producing the change matrix, that is in our future plans. Hopefully, once we get more or more improved data or better resolution data, then we will definitely be doing that. And next slide, please. Sorry, last slide. Yes, so just quickly, the way forward for us, we are definitely looking to include more stakeholders in our validation process, especially those stakeholders who are doing ground truthing or surveys on the ground, because we are using satellite imagery. We need that, and then further training and capacity building in this GIS area to incorporate this more in the release, as well as training on R and land cover change, and definitely continuing the production of land accounts, probably on an ad hoc basis, which would make more sense for us. So with that, just thank you for allowing me the time to share with you briefly about my experience with Binaka.
Thank you so much, Litia, for sharing this experience, both the results you've achieved in Fiji and as well as some of the reflections about the tools you've used. And I'm very happy that you found this whole process useful, and that there is a plan to move on and continue the work in Fiji. I want to just highlight one point, which Litia stressed in her presentation, that in addition to the technical work, which is what the tools really help everyone get through, there is a very intensive stakeholder engagement process that takes place in parallel. And we heard stakeholder discussions and consultations, both in terms of linking the work to the policy priorities, to get the data that was needed, and to validate the results before publishing. And it is an extremely important part of the whole process, in addition to the technical skills that we all need to build in the process. So thank you very much, Litia. And it's now my pleasure to give the next 3 minutes and the floor to our next speaker, which is Mr. Amin Shamsuddin, and we are moving from Fiji to ESCAP Center in the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Asia Pacific Disaster Information Management Center. So Amin, the floor is yours, please.
Good morning, good evening, colleagues. Thank you, Ricky. APTIM, Asia Pacific Center for the Development of Information, Disaster Information Management, is a ESCAP regional center which is specialized in for disaster information management. As you said, it's located in Tehran. Our program of work is mostly on 3 main area, including information and knowledge repository, capacity development, and facilitating regional cooperation for transboundary disasters. So satellite data and remote sensing have an important and emerging role for our center. The nature of the study we're mostly doing in APTIM is in scale, mostly regional and so using satellite data is I've chanced to review and use these guidelines the colleagues just introduced, and I mean in the statistic division, and I believe this kind of guideline that statistic division produced is very helpful. It's written, in a very simple and user-friendly way that experts with different background, even without the, academic background or remote sensing and GIS can easily use, even if they introduce the free online sources for the, different kind of layers. So it's really useful. For instance, I would like to introduce one of the APDIM recent studies, Sand and Dust Storm Risk Assessment in Asia and the Pacific, which we get a big help from Statistics Division and for this help. And basically for this risk assessment, we use several layers which categorize as a hazard, vulnerability, and resilience. And for the hazard component of the risk, we need the records, the long records of sand and dust storm event in the relatively large geographic area in Asia Pacific. And so basically the MIRA2 reanalysis data set is basically produced based on the satellite images. And basically, we use that one, and with the help of other socioeconomic layers, including the population density, road energy, other type of layers, and using this kind of guideline and help, to calculating and overlaying these layers, we produce the risk of sand and dust storm for various sectors, including agriculture, transport, health, and some others. It's more or less about this. I think my time is over by now, but I'm available if any more details need for this study. I'm happy to share.
Okay, thank you so much, Amin, for sharing your reflections, and I also want to thank you once again for helping in reviewing and testing the tools before they were finalized. It was a great help to have other eyes on this work as it was in progress. And so thanks both for your little promotional speech here on the tools. I very much appreciate that. And also for stressing that if we want to make the best use of satellite data, well, one of the alleyways here is to integrate it with other types of data. And you are looking particularly for useful applications in the area of disaster risk mapping, etc. This is in addition to the agricultural community. It's another community that really is opening their eyes for the powers of this type of data, because it's so obviously useful because of the geographical expanse that's so important no matter which type of hazard we look at. So thanks for being a great collaborator with us in the ESCAP Statistics Division team, and I'm sure that there's more to come. Thank you very much, Amin.
Thank you.
Good. So last but not least on our panel today, I will introduce a team presentation, or introduce a team, and they will make their presentation together. And this is Mr. Sohail Rastan, who is a senior research analyst at Statistics Canada. Sohail has also worked earlier for ESCAP as a regional advisor on environment statistics, and he's now calling in here in the middle of the night from Canada. So I very much appreciate that. And Sohail will be presenting together with Alad Musunuru, who is a GIS consultant with ESCAP at the moment. And Alad has been instrumental in developing these tools from the technical perspective, and has also been working very closely with Amin at APDIM, whom we just heard from. So Sohail and Alad, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Alahad, are you there?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So I will share my tray, and Ricky, we may need more than because more than 3 minutes each, maybe 4 minutes each. We'll go fast into it. So we'll see how we can do this.
Please try to make it in 6 minutes, because we are a little behind schedule.
Okay, no problem. So can you see my screen?
No, we cannot see your screen.
Okay then.
If not, I'll share the screen, Sohail.
Yes, go ahead for it.
Can you see the screen?
Fantastic. Yeah, go for it. Okay, so we would like to suggest a change for the name of ESCAP. We're going to call it Environment and Social Economic Commission for Asia and the Pacific. So it's a work between Alahad, myself, and of course Litia and many other groups. Can you go to the next slide, please, Alahad? And I have to acknowledge here Michael, Giuseppe, and Hugo, and you can see stars in them. I'll tell you why the stars are there. Of course, Gemma, Ricky, and Daniel, and Adil, and Linda, and Alahad. Linda was a paramount in basically starting the kickstart of all of these R scripts. And that's a special thanks to Arman and Diane to allow Linda to join the team. This presentation, hopefully, I'm dedicating to Giuseppe as a dear friend, colleague, and mentor who passed away. Next one, please. So 2-in-1 collaboration, we're going to address some issues in cross-sectional time series and segregation, if the time allows. Alahad, they told us that we have 5 minutes each, but that's fine. He will shine on satellite data using the R-Shine, and I will cover about 3 to 5 examples. Alahad, it's your floor. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Ahlad, and in this presentation we are going to discuss how to use R-Shiny application. The earlier guides and all we have seen, and this is so powerful application which helps to integrate the both spatial and socio-economic and environment data sets. And completely open, everything will be open and everything we can monitor. After image classifications, whether it can be satellite or drone or UAV, whatever it is, that it will be on numbers, and our script can read that and generate a statistical information like land cover change matrices, percentage tables, heat maps, where the land was increasing and where the land was decreasing. Everything comes in one platform. And this is the steps, that's the key objective of our study, to develop a complete script from scratch. This is the three data sets: satellite, socio-economic data sets, and we simulate this data set and integrate into one platform. And this helps to get various data sets. For example, when we consider the land cover change for agriculture, increasing the industrialization will strongly impact on the agriculture land cover change. We can see a balance of the economic growth, the economical impact. For example, the GDP from the industrialization is different, and the GDP from the agriculture, it will be different. When it will be overall GDP will be different when the increasing the industrial land cover, and there may be strong decrease in the agriculture land cover. Those decrease in the attributes we can keenly monitor by using our application. This is the overall script, and this R-Shiny was distinguished into 3 parts. First is general. We can see the inputs where we can keep, and we can run. And the UI and server, there are 2 applications will be there, and we can run the script. It will take around a couple of minutes. In this study, I have taken Bangkok, and we can use for any country or the region or the micro to macro level scales. Yep, it's done. And then this is the Shiny application, where the overall data sets is been distinguished into UI and server parts, and it's around roughly 2000 line codes. When we simulate this model, we can see this result. Firstly, the land cover change maps. From year to year, we can see the from 1995 to 2015 how the land was changing and how the trends are going from the rate of change of the land cover. and square kilometers when the urbanization is increasing, how the herbaceous crops, wood or any other crops land cover was decreasing. And this transition matrix from year to year, how these transitions have been varying will be updated, and you can download by using I can include a download function, and it will be also been there. You can see the change of the land cover. It generates around a couple of minutes, these all steps, especially if it is a micro scale. This is the percentage change, and we can see the rate of change, annual rate of change of the land cover, and the overall land cover changes, the square kilometers percentage for each land cover type we can monitor closely. And this can be updated for every year to year, and that too everything was free, you know. And you can see the herbaceous crops where the land was decreasing from the first 1992 to 2015 here. And similarly, how the urbanization was increasing on the left, we can see where the urbanization was increasing. And I should add the legend and some other map elements here. And this is the overall from the cross section intervals from 1992 to 2015, how the land was changing. This step we can see here. And now the data integration part. Within the land, there are other data sets we can give as an input. For now, I have taken some random data sets. This helps to normalize everything. When we keep this, when we run the script, every data set, every socioeconomic data sets will be normalized and integrates with all land cover types data set. And then we can monitor with closely with the one's index score. It's a mean index score. I'm sorry. This is the index score, and then we can see how this impacts on. And this is the correlation matrix. So we can see how this correlations was happening among the data set. And this is the non-parametric regression. This helps to identify the dependent and independent variables, how among each other, each type of classes. And then the trends. This is the normalized with all the land cover. For example, increasing the urbanization, how the increasing it affects on the decreasing the GDP of the agriculture. These all can also be monitored from this.
Alad,
yes,
can I ask you to wrap up and pass it to Sohail, because your 6 minutes already
he's already done. He's already done. Yeah, he's done.
Okay, please.
Yeah, he will be.
These are some of the future recommendations, and Sohail, you can take this from now.
Sure, it's an amazing. I mean, you're adding lenses to the low resolution data through other population and GDP. So please go to the next one. And when I say next, just go. Okay, first of all, you remember the star? Those were Canadians, and the first GIS was from Canada in 1963. And some people may not know that. Next slide, please. I have to sell Canada, right? I'm going to give some census of agricultural land balance. This is in addition to the edit imputation allocation estimation that we used to do. This is for 2005. Next slide, please. So we use satellite imagery to see how correctly they basically report the land area, because we had double counting in some of the land areas in Saskatchewan, which holds 41% of Canada's ag land. So in here, every square you see is 160 acres, and the report you see in the small screen there is about 25. So this was okay. So you see it's a green. So this respondent was correct. Next, please. The next one, we can see another one in the square, which is water, but the respondent reported 160. So that was a mistake. It's not supposed to report 160. It's supposed to be less than that because the water cover in that farm. Next one, please. So we've done the same thing. So the satellite imagery can basically help us to validate the response of the land area in terms of the census of agriculture for every single questionnaire. Next slide. The example, another one is on population weighted ground level ozone. Next slide, please, in 2007. So we use the location of every single monitoring station, and we did 40 rims of 1 kilometer each around it, and we populated the population every single one of these rims. So every quarter rim has a population attached to it using the GIS data. And of course, you see the windrows data. So we have to basically factor it by the windrows data where the wind comes in order to develop an exposure indicator. Next. So we used all of these monitoring stations across Canada, and we used the population weighted. We weighted the concentration by population. And next. And we came up with this publication that we said the good days are getting worse and the bad days remain the same, because we used, again, the SEN non-parametric methodology, and we used the Monte Carlo simulation in order to basically see the trends at the lower end and the higher end. Next one, please. Of course, and we played with the population rims. I mean, we took 40-kilometer rim around population and we played all of it, and we see some impact in the rims that's happening there. Next one, please. Third example is the evaporative losses from retail gas stations in Canada. That was a project I was responsible for. It's a $1 million survey in order to calculate how much emissions Canadians are getting from filling up their cars. The difference in the BR between and the private sector was huge. Our business register says 20,000 locations. The think tank, this is 13,000. So what's happening here? So we used some type of a GIS in order to correct our estimates. Next one, please. So you see, this is address came from the BR, and we mapped it over Google images, and we see, yes, on the right one, it is a gas station, but on the left one, it was not a gas station. So we try to correct the BR in terms of location. Next one, please. Finally, we mapped the entire gas stations, and we had to use a density so that we hide, by definition, we should not divulge where exactly gas stations are, just to respect the confidentiality. Next one, please. We also used not Google, not satellite, but you use the Google Street in order to validate some of responses. For example, we ask how many dispensers you have. Somebody says it's 12. It was impossible for someone to have 12 dispensers. So we went and we said, yes, it was a mistake. It's only six dispensers there. Next one, please. Example number 4 is about developing ecosystems landscape sustainability indicator for Montreal. And the graph here is the end result. And we came up with a landscape potential capacity. So in short, Montreal has been losing for the last, between the 2 years, 2010 to 2011, 3 kilometers square in potential capacity. Next, please. And the idea was to basically take not only the satellite image from the MODIS 250 by 250, but we added extra lens, the population per every cell and the road change per every cell. And we came up with signals processing here. And you can see on the right, there are multiple signals from all the way the red, the highest degradation, all the way to the blue, the lowest degradation. Next one, please. And we came up with an interesting observation at the end of the day. We said that, yes, the land degraded. We built so many roads on that cells, but there was no population there. What's happening here? So suddenly we realized we developed a tool to indicate where are the industrial facilities, right? Because there's no population on those industrials, because population census covers only your homes. Next one, please. And finally, of course, Alahat have done this when I was in Maldives, the project we called IC Maldives, and we could not use satellite current ESA for Maldives. Neither I think we can use it for Vanuatu. The resolution cannot help. But finally, Alahat came up with this innovative idea that you're going to use the night vision just to indicate how is that particular part of Maldives is expanding. And this generated a huge amount of excitement for the NSO of Maldives. Next one, please. We are done. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much, Sohail and Alat. As you can all see in the audience, the opportunities for further development are limitless, and it's great work, both in the past and still ongoing from both of you. And so I want to thank you very much. I think it was worth it for all of us that you were given a little more time than allocated. We are actually nearing the hour. So what I will do is to pick up one of the questions that we received earlier before the session from one of the participants and pass that question to my colleague, Anthony Dvaskas, the regional advisor, to reflect a bit on this. I see some questions in the chat about the slides from today. They will all be available on the Stats Café website, which we will share a link to in the chat function before we close the cafe. So the question to Anthony Dvaskas is a question that was received before the session. How do we use satellite data, or can satellite data be used to estimate poverty rates at the subnational level? So Anthony, this question is for you, and I'll ask you to also present your summary reflections from what we've heard from the many panelists and discussions during the Stats Café today. So Anthony, the floor and final words are yours, please.
Great, thanks, Rike. Thanks, and hello, everyone. Yes, I put in the chat, ADB recently put out a supplement that went over in good detail the various approaches that can be used to use satellite data to the Asia Development Bank, sorry, to estimate poverty. And I mean, in a nutshell, the work is still evolving. There's a lot of research going into this area as to the best approaches for estimating poverty using satellite data. But most of them, actually, to tie back to everything we talked to today, involve using the satellite data in conjunction with other data. And I think that's one of the key points that we've seen throughout here, is that the satellite data is just one of the many kinds of data sources that people should be considering when they're developing their policy plans. And we've seen them used in a range of different areas here. Particularly, we saw that Fiji is figuring out how to use that globally sourced data in conjunction with its own data that's collected on tourism and economics, statistics and economic sectors. And for disaster statistics, Amin mentioned how we can use that satellite data also in combination with economic data and estimates of population density that are collected from other sources in order to evaluate different decisions we might want to make. And I think one of the other interesting points that's come up in today's discussion is that this isn't, not only is this looking across a wide range of statistical data sources, but it's also requires, in doing that, requires working across a range of institutions and collaboratively. And so you might not be able to just sit safely within your normal box of day-to-day when you're trying to explore the use of the satellite data. And it'll be important to engage with the people who may have reference data sets that are useful for cross-checking outcomes that are predicted based on your satellite data. And so building those kind of networks are important and useful for using satellite data. And actually, that brings to one of the other points here, and I'll be quick here, is that experimentation, since this is still an evolving area, experimentation remains an important part of this work, and that countries and others who are considering using satellite data shouldn't be afraid of getting it perfectly right the first time, but that starting to work with the data can actually start to build the build the coordination structure and then build also ideas about how satellite data might be able to be used in the future and priorities for doing that. And with that, sorry, one last thing. There are, along those lines, in terms of facilitating that kind of experimentation and seeing what you can do with what's available, like with what Fiji did when they did not find the data they might have initially wanted. There are tools and there are open source data available, and the manuals that ESCAP has produced, as well as other resources, can give guidance into how to start working with those data sets. And also, I think one of the things in the future that is going to be interesting is the ESCAP manuals now have discussion of hotspots and land cover. There's going to be a lot of possibility for taking that kind of process and applying it to other other areas in the future than just land cover, right? You can see that there are opportunities based on the kinds of disaster stats and other things that have come up today. And with that, I will wrap us up here. Thanks to all of the speakers today for very insightful presentation and discussion. I'm sorry we didn't have too much more time for questions, but please get in touch with us if you do have any down the line. And thank you all for participating, and have a good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.